Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and hello, everybody. My name is Payal Tandon, and I will be your host today for this webinar in which we are going to be talking about the 3 mistakes that students do while preparing for the Gmat. First of all, I would like to also thank Gmat Club for giving us this platform so that we can reach out to majority of the Gmat aspirants and help them get to their target Gmat score in the most efficient and effective manner. So in the spirit of that, we are here today to talk about the 3 mistakes that students do while preparing for the Gmat. Okay, so let's get going over here. And just to introduce my fellow co-founder and the Gmat strategy expert, Rajat Sadana. So he would be responding to your questions under the ID eGmat in the chat pod. So welcome everyone once again. Okay, so let's get going here. Now, the most critical part of Gmat preparation is creating your personalized study plan. Now, this is something that Rajat talked about in detail in our previous live session here. And just to reiterate a few points from that, the overall planning process really constitutes of 3 things. The first one, you need to quantify your starting abilities. The second one, you need to define your milestones, okay? What are your target milestones in order to get to that overall Gmat score of, let's say, 740 or 760 or whatsoever your target score is? And then how is it that you utilize that information to personalize your course so that you can get to your target Gmat score based on what your starting abilities are and what your target subsectional abilities are in each of the 5 subsections that are tested on the Gmat. Now, as I said, Rajat discussed this topic in detail in this webinar. So in case you missed, in case you haven't viewed that webinar, click on this link over here and you should be able to get there. And again, I'll be sharing this PDF towards the end of the session, so you'll have all these links at your disposal. All right. Now, you can actually create your study plan by clicking on this icon below, gmatplanner.com. So definitely take advantage of that. Now, once you have your plan ready, and I'm hoping that everyone will be able to create your own personalized study plan in the right manner. Once you have your plan ready, next thing is execution. And in this session, we're going to be talking about what are those mistakes that students typically do in the execution phase of their Gmat prep. Okay, so again, plan is a very, very important step, and this is something which we've already talked about. So I don't want you guys to be making any mistakes as it comes to your plan. But once you have your plan ready, just a solid plan is not going to help you. You have to ensure that you do not make any mistakes while implementing this plan, and that is what is the primary focus of this session. Okay, now. So what can happen if you make mistakes in execution phase? Okay, the first thing that will happen is you will not be able to get to your target score, and that is very disappointing. Especially, when I know that all of you prepare so hard. I mean, you put in your hours and hours of study time, having a full-time job, having a personal life to take care of, preparing for Gmat is a very big commitment. So I don't want you guys to be making certain mistakes and ending up not getting to your target score. So again, that's something which we don't want to happen. Secondly, people end up taking multiple attempts because they don't prepare the right way in the first time itself. And that leads to time loss and monetary loss. $250 for every Gmat attempt. That's a lot of money, right? So we want to make sure that you don't end up falling in this pitfall and facing this problem. Lastly, you may not be able to realize your true potential, and that can cost you your admit to your target B school or that scholarship that would have helped you from your financial standpoint. So again, mistakes in execution lead to these problems, and that is what we are here to prevent. Okay, so that you don't end up facing these problems in your Gmat journey, in your MBA journey. Okay. All right, so as I said, goal of this session is to help you realize the 3 biggest mistakes that students do while preparing for the test. Again, this is in the execution phase so that you can avoid making those mistakes. All right, now how are we going to do that? first and foremost, I want to get this feedback, this input from you. Type yes if you agree with any of these statements. The first statement is, the key to acing GMAT is practicing as many questions as you can. That's the first statement. Solving official guide questions is the best way to prepare for the GMAT. Third statement, the more questions I solve from multiple sources, the more I will learn. If you agree with one or more with one or more of these statements, click yes or type yes in the chat pod. So I see that only one person has said no to this question. A number of you are saying yes. All right. So hold on to this. I'm going to utilize. I am going to utilize this input later on as we move forward in this session. Okay. Now, next, what we're going to do is we are going to solve 2 sentence correction questions. We'll get into question solving mode right away. Now, I'm going to give you 90 seconds to solve each of these questions. After about, I would say about 80 seconds, I'm going to give you a 10-second warning, letting you know that the time is approaching. And then I'm going to show you the next question. And I would want you to write down A, B, C, D, or E, depending upon whatever is the correct answer choice in your mind. As you're solving the questions, I also want you to keep in mind what is the approach that you are using to solve those questions. Okay, so keep that in mind as well, because I am going to be asking you questions with regards to that. All right, so here is your first question, question 1, SC logging. Let's get your responses to these questions. To this question, sorry. All right, last few seconds. I have some responses coming in. Let's get some more responses here. All right, I'm going to now show you the next question. Here's the next question. Go ahead and solve it. All right, last few seconds. Put in your answers, please. Okay, so let's carry forward here. So Rajat, if you could please collate the responses here, I would really appreciate it. So here for question number 1, the correct answer is choice E. And I am going to go through the details of why your choice E is the correct answer. Based on your responses, 7 people put in the answers and 4 of you selected choice E. The other 2 selected choice B and 1 person selected choice C. So the accuracy for this question over here in this session is about 57%. This question is as such a 700 level question. Now, tell me one thing. How did you approach this question? And answer this question as yes or no if the thought process that I have listed out over here makes sense to you. That is, you first read the choice and you got the gist of the sentence. Then you identified the splits in the choices. Then you evaluated one split at a time. And then you went back to the sentence if you needed to in order to understand the meaning in detail. And then you eliminated choices. So how many of you associated with this kind of thought process? Does this thought process resonate with you? Choice for question number 1. Okay, I'm glad to hear, I'm glad to read this comment here. No, that never works for such a long underlined sentence. Absolutely. What about you did meaning analysis? Neeraj, good. Rahul is saying no. All right, that is good. I'm glad that number of you do not associate with this thought process. Now, tell me one thing. Will you have associated with this thought process if small portion of this sentence were underlined? Yes or no? So I'm writing this down. Will you have associated with this process if a small portion was underlined? Kumar is saying yes. Neeraj is also saying yes, perhaps. Okay. And Neeraj, you did the meaning analysis for this question. Okay. Yeah, I do that. That's what Rahul is saying. How about Rahul Ramchandran? How about you? You said that this process, the splits process doesn't work for such a long underline, but how about if only a small portion of the sentence were underlined, then would this thought process have resonated with you? That's the question to everyone. All right, as you guys type in your answers, I will carry forward here. Probably I go for meaning analysis if I get confused. Thank you, Rahul. So again, very, very nice. So essentially what I gather from this is, from your responses, that if the sentence is completely underlined, you do try to understand the meaning of the sentence. But if the sentence is partially underlined, then you do go for the splits method and you only resort to meaning analysis if you get confused. All right, so keep that point in mind, okay? Now, if, let's say, for those of you who made a mistake in this question, and again, I will be going through the detailed solution of this one, but first what I want you to understand, what I want you to tell me is that if you made a mistake in this question, how would you, rather if you maintain an error log, typically what kind of data do you enter in it? If you maintain an error log, what kind of data do you enter in it? Not specific to this question, but just in general. Category of questions. So for this question, what would be the category? Parallelism or subject-verb agreement or modifier issue, where you made the mistake and what led you to make the mistake. Okay, Kanha, elaborate a little bit. So again, Kanha, I'm going to ask you what you're going to make the entry for this question once I go through the solution, because what you're talking about is very relevant. Where you made the mistake and what led you to make the mistake. That is very, very important. That is the most critical piece for any error log to be effective in making sure that you get to your target ability of that 90 percentile or 85 percentile, whatsoever your target ability is. All right, so data, Arvind is saying data, question type, what the mistake was, what was your takeaway? All right, good. So hold on to those thoughts. Again, we can always come back to this chat here. Now let's solve the first question over here, the logging related question. Now, I'm going to walk you through the process that I use for any kind of question, regardless of whether it's completely underlined, whether it's partially underlined, or even if just a single word is underlined. This is the method that I use to solve the question. The first step is meaning analysis. And whenever I read a sentence, I make sure that I understand each and every part of the sentence. What I make sure is that this sentence is composed of multiple ideas. Okay, and I need to know idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, and so on, idea 5. Again, it can be composed of as many as 5 ideas, 6 ideas, whatsoever the case may be. So that's what my goal is in the first step, to understand in detail what the author is trying to tell me. Okay, for that, I utilize this method called a strategic pausing method. What this method entails is that as I'm reading the sentence, I'm pausing at appropriate points. I'm assimilating the information that the author is giving me. As I'm going ahead and reading the next chunk of the sentence, I'm relating what I have read just now with what I had read previously in that particular sentence. So that is how I actually apply the strategic pausing method. Okay. Now, so let me demonstrate this method to you on this question. So in some city in Guyana, reduced impact logging sustains. So again, this is my first pause. So essentially in this city in Guyana, reduced impact logging sustains. So that's my subject verb pair. So I pause here. So this is something RI logging. That's what I'm going to be shortening it up as RI logging. Sustains something. Sustains what? Forest preservation, wildlife protection, and crabwood oil production. So 1, 2, 3. So these are 3 elements of my list here of what RI logging sustains. Comma, identifying the best ways to cut trees. All right, so identifying, this is a verb ing modifier. So I'm applying my understanding of how verb ing modifiers work. And it appears as if this is modifying the actions that have been taken over here. That the fact that RI logging sustains these 3 things leads to identifying the best ways to cut trees, or RI logging sustains these three things by identifying the best ways to cut trees. So again, that's what that's what the author is trying to tell me. Okay, so essentially, aspect 1 sentence explains what RI logging does in this stated place. Okay, aspect number 2, it sustains three things: forest preservation, wildlife protection, and crabwood production. And by doing these three things, by sustaining these three things, RI logging identifies the best way to cut trees. Okay, so that's the meaning that I got from this sentence. Okay, now what I want you to understand is aspect 3 logical? So after I read the sentence, I not only understand what the sentence is telling me, I'm also questioning, does this make sense? Does this make sense? That's very, very important. Okay. Now, if you look at this part over here, first part makes perfect sense, no problems with that. Second part makes perfect sense. Third part is where things get a little bit dicey. And that's where you start to question yourself, okay, does it make sense to say any of these, that by sustaining forest preservation, RI logging identifies the best way to cut trees? I mean, you're trying to figure out, is the author making sense over here? So tell me, is aspect 3 logical? Tell me that. Yes or no? Do you think aspect number 3 is logical? Okay, Anirudh says no, Rahul says no. And why is that the case? Why is it not logical? It's not logical because it doesn't make sense to say any of these three things, that by sustaining forest preservation, RI logging identifies. I mean, you're talking about forest preservation, preserving the forest. How does that lead you to identifying the best way to cut trees? Or by sustaining this oil production, how does RI logging identify the best way to cut trees, right? Now, my next question to you is, so aspect 3 is not logical at all. So my next question to you is, now, when you solve the question on your own, were you able to identify that aspect 3 is illogical? Absolutely, Abhishek. Sustaining forests and cutting trees cannot go hand in hand. You're absolutely right. Biswajit Roy, hold on to your explanation. RI logging is not identifying. We will talk about that, but just hold on to that. Anirudh, you're absolutely right. It's a feature of RI logging and not a consequence of aspect 2. Absolutely correct. Now, before that, let's talk about when you solve the question on your own, were you able to identify that aspect 3 is illogical? So click yes, type yes if you were able to identify that aspect 3 was illogical, and type no if you were not able to. So Satya, you were not able to, okay. Again, I'm not sure what question you're answering no to. Let me just type out the question here. Okay, some of you have started saying yes. Okay, Lily, you were not able to. That's okay. Shubham, you were able to. Anirudh, you also. Rahul, you also. Okay. All right, good. So if you were able to identify that aspect 3 does not make sense, good. Okay, Lily, that's okay. You're here to learn. These are the things that you need to be able to identify. Okay, whenever you're reading the sentence for its meaning, you need to understand, is this logical or not? Okay, now Abhishek, you're saying it would take a long time. Hold on to that thought. Okay, now you have, okay, so I will address the timing part as well over here. Okay, now what should be the logical meaning? Let me extend this further. You not only need to understand whether something is logical or not, you also need to be able to figure out you also need to be able to figure out what did the author actually mean. Okay, what was it that the author wanted to communicate when he wrote these pieces of information together in a sentence? Now, in this case, logically, as Anirudh has already specified, Logically, what the author wants to say is that identifying the best way to cut trees should be one of the actions that RI logging does. Okay, so it's one of the features of RI logging that it identifies the best way to cut trees. In a sense, what the author wanted to communicate was logically that RI logging sustains A, B, and C, and RI logging identifies the best way to cut trees. Okay, and this brings me back to one of the comments here. Let me just see. Biswajit Roy, you said that RI logging is not identifying. That is not correct. RI logging is actually identifying, but the key thing is that these three, the fact that RI logging does these three things has got nothing to do with aspect number 3. So these are not related to each other. That is what is wrong with this sentence. Okay. The actual thing is that RI logging identifies the best way to cut trees and RI logging sustains A, B, and C. Okay. Now, all of these things need to be done. That is, you need to first understand the meaning, and that you do by doing strategic pausing, by pausing at the right points. Okay. Then you need to figure out, is this logical? Is the meaning logical? If it is logical, well and good. You move on to the answer choice analysis. If you realize that it's not logical, then you infer the logical meaning. You need to do all these steps in order to understand, in order to get that ability to evaluate answer choices. Because if you do not do these steps, when you look at those remaining 4 answer choices, you will be confused because most likely at least 2 answer choices will look very, very correct to you because you would not have gone through this analysis over here. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to demonstrate that to you. So again, just a takeaway. Read the sentence slowly by applying strategic pausing method so that you understand everything that the sentence wants to communicate. Okay? And before you move to the next step, always make sure that the sentence presents logical meaning. If it does not, then infer the logical meaning. There is no shortcut about it. There is no 2 opinions about it. This is what that has to be done if you want to get to that 730 plus score. Or if you want to get to that 90th percentile ability, then you need to do that. You can get by not doing this to solve easy questions. Definitely. You don't need to do all of this stuff for easy questions because easy questions don't have such kind of complexities in them, right? But your goal is to be able to solve those difficult questions correctly. Okay? For that, you need to do this. You need to do this. Okay? All right, so now let's come back to the answer choices over here. So choice A has modifier error, which actually leads to the meaning error here, right? Just because we have used this as a verb ing modifier, it actually distorts the meaning. It actually communicates an illogical meaning. Now let's look at choice B. Choice B was selected by 2 people, okay? And look at choice B. There is not much of a difference between choices A and B. They're both the same. They're just in a different sentence structure. Choice B has the same error as choice A. Now, if you have not identified what the logical meaning is, you will actually fall in the trap of this answer choice. You will feel that, okay, choice B does seem to be correct, okay? Now, choice C is incorrect. I know one person selected choice C. Choice C has a grammatical error. Identify is singular. Is plural. Reduced impact logging is singular. So there's a subject verb agreement error. That's why choice C is wrong. Choice D, again, illogical because which refers to crabwood oil production. It doesn't make sense that crabwood oil production identifies the best way to cut trees. That's absolutely illogical. And choice E is absolutely correct. It actually communicates the logical intended meaning. Okay. Now, let's see. We'll come to the error log entry, but I do want to address Abhishek's concern because that's a concern that some people have that all of this, you want me to read slowly, you want me to understand, figure out if the sentence is logical or not. If it's not logical, you want me to infer the logical meaning. Are you nuts for recommending this process for a test that is GMAT, which is a time test? No, I'm not nuts. This is the process that works. This is the process that has worked for thousands and thousands of students who are able to get to that 750, that 760 score, that 90th percentile ability. Why? Because as you start learning the process, it becomes second nature to you. This is a sure shot way of you to be able to solve those difficult questions correctly. Okay. So again, this is the only way that you can get to solving those difficult questions correctly. Okay, now again, when you are learning the process, you will take time. I'm not saying that right after this session, some magic is going to happen and you'll be able to solve these questions correctly by utilizing this process within the 90-second time constraint that some of you impose on you. No, that is not what is going to happen. What's going to happen is that you will, as you're practicing this method, utilizing the right kind of sources, utilizing the right kind of help, you will be able to make this process a second nature. And ultimately, you will be able to solve questions in very less amount of time. That is what actually ends up happening. Okay, so you need to put in that effort. Okay, all right. Okay. Now that you've gone through the solution, tell me what is the entry that you will make in your error log for this question? All right, let's get some responses. What is the entry that you will make in your error log if you solve this question and got it wrong? Subject, verb, and parallelism. Biswajit Roy, okay. Let's get some more responses here. So I have subject, verb, parallelism. I have pay attention to subject, verb, error. I have understand the meaning always. I have modifier. Okay. So anybody else? Whatever the part of the process you did not notice. Okay, good, Arvind. Okay, so trying to get my camera on here. Just give me 1 second. Yes, all right. So absolutely. Understand the meaning. Again, it's very important. Okay, this question tested you on modifiers, right? But for you to take any meaningful information out of your error log, what you need to enter is that what step of the process were you not able to do, as Arvind rightly mentioned. Okay, so in this case, if you selected choice C, but you also were able to figure out the illogical meaning communicated by choice A, then really you missed out on identifying the subject verb error. So in that case, subject verb error makes perfect sense as an entry, because that is what you need to be careful about. Okay. Now, if you selected, let's say, choice B, then the error that you made is that you did not understand the meaning of the sentence. That is what needs to go in your error log. In that case, if you make modifier as the error log entry, you're not going to be able to do much about it, because what do you do with modifier? You know the rules about modifiers, that modifiers need to be placed appropriately, how verb ing modifiers work whatsoever, and whatnot. What will you be able to do by noting down modifier as an error log entry? That's not going to help you make sure that you don't make this mistake again while solving questions. So always be very specific in making your error log entries, to the point that with an intent that you should be able to take an actionable thing out of that error log entry. That next time when I solve the question, I will make sure that I understand the meaning of the sentence. I will make sure that I will question whether the sentence is logical or not. I will make sure that I infer the meaning of the sentence. Okay. All right. So now let's move on to our next question, the pages question. Now, this question was very interesting. Let's go through the meaning analysis here first. So American oil tycoon Armand Hammer paid this much amount at an auction for a notebook over here, contains 72 loose pages that featured, contains 72 loose pages. Okay, so it contains this notebook contains 72 loose pages. By the way, these pages featured Leonardo da Vinci's notes and detailed drawings, all related to the common theme of water and its movement. Okay, so the sentence is pretty straightforward. Aspect 1, A.H. Armand Hammer paid the said amount for a notebook. Then aspect number 2, this notebook contains 72 loose pages. Aspect number 3, these pages featured Da Vinci's notes about something. Okay, so these are the 3 aspects that I got from this. Now, choice A is wrong, and none of you selected choice A. Essentially, choice B was the most popular choice. About 7 to 8 people, when I did the count, 7 to 8 people selected this one. Only about 3 people selected choice E. Okay, so let's talk about choice A. Why is choice A wrong? Choice A is wrong because AH paid X amount for a notebook contains pages. There is subject-verb issue over here. So choice A is wrong. Choice B is wrong because there is a change in meaning. That contains 72 loose pages. This is fine. To feature. I mean, the whole point of containing 72 pages was the intention was not to feature these notes. Okay, so this part is absolutely wrong. Again, not many of you, I don't believe anyone selected choice B. Choice C, containing 72 loose pages and featuring. This is wrong. Why? Because what this is saying is that the notebook featured these notes. No, the author wants to say that these pages, these loose pages featured these notes. Okay, so choice C is wrong. Choice D, that contains 72 loose pages featuring. Now, this was the most popular choice over here, but this is wrong. Why? Because what this is saying is, this choice ends up saying that because the notebook contains 72 loose pages, the notebook, the impact of that is that the notebook features these notes, and that is absolutely nonsensical. Okay, so choice D is wrong. Choice E is the correct answer. Featuring modifies pages, containing modifies notebook. It's absolutely correct. So now tell me. Now, most students who get this question wrong will log it as a modifier error. Okay, and the corrective action is going to be revise modifier concepts. Okay, so that corrective action is not going to help, because really speaking, why the student got this question wrong was because, let's go back to the question here, was because the student did not really understand all the aspects. Let's go back to this. Had you understood aspect number 3, that these pages featured Da Vinci's notes, you would not have made the mistake of selecting choice D. Okay, so let me take some questions here. Biswajit, you're absolutely right. It depends on the selection of the answer choice. Your error log entry always depends on what choice you are selecting and whether you have done all the prerequisite steps before even getting to the answer choice analysis. Okay, so that is what is required. Okay, the question type doesn't really feature a whole lot there. Okay, why is A wrong? A is wrong because of the I believe you're talking about, I don't know, Aham, what are you talking? Which question are you talking about? Question 1 or question 2? Question 2, A is wrong because it's a run-on sentence here. He paid this much amount for a notebook contains. Again, there should be a that contains over here. That is what is wrong with this sentence. Okay. When A is correct, does the meaning conveyed by A not change? No. When A is incorrect, does the meaning conveyed by A not change? How do we assume the meaning? Malvika, you're not assuming the meaning. Essentially, think about it this way. The author, and let's see, the author has given you 1, 2, 3, 4, these different aspects, okay? You can understand the meaning of each of these aspects of the sentence, right? Now, the author may have illogically connected 3 with 4. Again, so I'm just taking a hypothetical example over here, right? But you know that, okay, the connection between 3 and 4 does not seem logical, right? So all you're doing is you're trying to help the author communicate the correct meaning by figuring out what is the logical connection there, right? So that is what you have to do, all right? So you have to infer the meaning. You don't have to make any assumptions. You have to infer based on the individual items. That's why it's very important to understand all the aspects communicated by the question statement, okay, by the original sentence. Once you understand that, then what you have to say is, does it make sense? If it makes sense, well and good, move forward. If it doesn't make sense, then you pause and you see what could the author be talking about, okay? All right. Let's talk about what other questions are there. Rahul, you're saying you were really confused between D and E, but you chose E in the end because it sounded better. Okay, so Rahul, if you made that mistake, you ended up selecting the correct choice, okay? But in your error log, you have to make sure that you put in a specific explanation that because you answered this question for the wrong reason. Sounding right is not the right thing, right? Is not the correct thing to be put in as the reason for selecting the right choice, right? So you need to make appropriate notes in your error log that you failed to understand aspect 3 of this sentence, okay? So very, very important. So thank you, Rahul, for bringing that up, okay? 3 Liquid Snake 3, that's an interesting name. Could you please explain why can't the notebook feature? Option C also seemed correct to me in spite of understanding the question thoroughly. Okay. Again, option C is logical. I'm not saying option C is not logical, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is what does the original choice say? The original choice says that this notebook contains 72 loose pages that featured. Now, these loose pages featured Da Vinci's notes. Now, think about it. These are individual pages. These pages individually feature these notes. And then these loose pages have been combined into a notebook, have been collated into a notebook. And that is what the original choice is actually saying. Okay, so over here, so Aviral, you are saying similar stuff to what Liquid Snake 3 is saying, but again, you have to see. I'm not saying that it's not logical. It is logical. Choice C is logical, but it changes the meaning. Now it's saying that the notebook features. But again, what the author intended to say was that these individual loose pages feature these Da Vinci's notes and detailed drawings, and these notes have been collated into this notebook. Okay, so you have to make sure that you communicate what the author is intending to communicate, and all these things will be very, very clear if you write down explicitly what the original sentence says, aspect 1, aspect 2, aspect 3, and keep those as your checklist when you're reviewing the answer choices. But how can we know when the original intent of the question is arguable? If it's not logical, it is arguable. As simple as that. In the previous question, question number 1, it didn't make sense that preservation of forest leads to the logging to identify ways to cut trees. That was absolutely illogical. In this sentence, there is nothing to question. There is a notebook that contains loose pages. Those loose pages feature Da Vinci's notes. There is no reason for you to argue that. Okay, that's why I'm not saying that you always infer the correct meaning. You always first understand, then you question whether it's logical or not. If it is not logical, only then you infer. Okay, all right. So again, let's go further. All right. So again, most students who will get this question wrong will log this as modifier. Okay. But again, modifier, just that corrective action is not going to help you. Okay. So, Arvind, you are making that point. Official GMAT questions are really ambiguous. I will provide you with a question that is similar to this one, in which there's so much of communication that has so much of argument that are going on. So again, it's up to you. You can believe in that statement, or you can understand the method that is required for you to solve these questions. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at some of the comments over here. Sirish S, he's a student who scored, I believe, 760. So this is his debrief, and you can view his debrief over here at this link. Be thorough in reviewing your answers. Okay, you learn as much from the review as from solving a question. Reviewing even the questions that you got correct is very important. This exercise helps you learn new ways of solving a question, besides allowing you to check whether you got the question correct because of the right reasons. Okay, so very, very important to understand the right reasons behind selecting selecting the correct answer choice. Okay, so all right. So one thing, again, every time I talk about the process, I always want you to make sure that you keep that end goal in mind. Your goal is to solve difficult questions correctly. Okay. Students should learn the process to approach the questions. It needs to be one standard process that you solve. Okay. Students should do strategic review to identify why they made a mistake while solving the question. Sounds right is not correct. If you got the question right, but not for the right reasons, that question you should mark as incorrect in your error log. Okay, you just got lucky while in that particular practice session. So you always have to, and how do you do that? You can do this kind of analysis only if there are detailed solutions provided to you, solutions that are based on this process that you need to make second nature. Okay, so that you can solve these difficult questions correctly. Okay. Now, this is where I come to the mistakes. Mistake number 1 is that student does not focus on learning the process to solve questions. Okay, that is classic mistake number 1. Okay. Now, how many of you are currently making that mistake? Say yes if you are in the chat pod over here. Okay. Now, why is that students do not focus on learning the process? In my opinion, there are 2 reasons. One is traditional learning methodology is focused on conceptual learning. Okay, you learn the concepts, you practice concepts, blah, 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 right? But GMAT is a test of application. Okay, it's the test that's testing you on your ability to solve difficult questions correctly. Okay, always come back to this definition of what it is that GMAT is testing you on. Can you solve difficult questions correctly? Okay, so that's why the traditional learning methodology that we have ingrained in our minds, that it's the concept, you learn the concepts, you practice, right? So that is not going to work on the GMAT. Okay, second reason is GMAT is a time test, right? So students feel that they need to answer questions quickly. Okay, after all, GMAT is a time test. And if you follow this long drawn method of understanding, pausing, inferring, questioning, you're not going to be able to solve questions in the test, in the timed environment of the GMAT. That is another misconception that people have. Just because in the learning phase process takes longer doesn't mean that when you have imbibe that process, when that process has become second nature, it will still take long. No, in fact, to the contrary, students who imbibe this process are able to solve SC questions in 60 seconds or fewer. Okay, they see marked time improvement, whether it's SC, whether it's CR, whether it's RC, whether it's quant. In everything, in every concept, in every subsection, they see a marked improvement in the time that they take to answer questions. And again, as I tell people, as you are learning the process, your ability is improving, okay? And as your ability is improving, your time to answer questions comes down. That is what happens. Your time to answer questions comes down. But again, initially, you will take long. When your ability is not there, when you're learning the process, you will take time to answer questions, okay? Now, the next thing is, there's another two more quotes. This is a success story of Gotham. Only after building sufficient ability, that is skill, it is meaningful to worry about the speed. He says right spot on. So while I was learning, I never timed myself. For many questions, I would take more than 7 minutes to mark an answer. Again, he was making notes as well. So again, as you're learning, to my point, as you're learning, you will take longer, okay? After finishing all the lessons, I began taking custom tests in an application called Scholaranium. And while taking these sample tests, I brought down the time it takes to solve CR questions from 3.5 minutes to around 2 minutes. Now he's talking about CR. This is the amount of time that he was taking to solve CR questions. Ultimately, he was able to solve CR questions correctly in less than 2 minutes. Okay, so again, you feel free to read his debrief over here. All right. So again, the key thing over here is you need to make sure that you focus on learning the process to solve questions, okay? Now, I have a question. Arvind is saying, could you also touch on how often to consume or revisit the error log? Should I be reading my takeaways from the error log daily or just every X days? Again, Arvind, depends on which step of the process you are at, okay? If you are in stage 1, which is when you are learning the concepts and the methods, which is when you're learning the methods and the concepts, you don't need to look at error log as frequently. Probably once in 2 to 3 days should be good. But if you are in stage 2 by itself should take only about 2 to 3 days. And what is stage 2? We talk about it in detail in our Gmat strategy session. So we can share the recording with you guys for that. It should take about 2 to 3 days. And this is where you are cementing your methods. Now, in this phase, you should be reviewing your error log after every quiz that you take. Because again, doing strategic review, learning from that strategic review is what is going to get you to that next level in your ability. Okay, so it really depends on which phase of your preparation you are in. And EGMAT students get proper guidance as they are going through one stage to another as to what it is that you should be focusing on next. Okay. Rahul, I have another 20 to 25 days to my test. Do I have time to both understand the process and make it second nature? Absolutely, Rahul, you do. Okay. And again, you will have certain innate ability to begin with. And looking at your responses early on, you already are doing certain things intuitively, right? All you need is just a little bit of hand-holding, a little bit of guidance and focused practice. That is what you need. So definitely you have ample amount of time. And again, as I said, plan is personalized to you. What are your starting abilities? Maybe you are one such person who is already, let's say, in CR, you're already, let's say, at 85 percentile. In that case, CR, you don't have to do much. Your innate ability is working. Maybe you need help only with ST. So again, you have to reach out to us and tell us where you're at so that we can help you create your personalized study plan. Okay, so let's come back to the mistakes over here. So mistake one was student, and a number of you are making that mistake today, okay? Which is okay. I want you to realize that mistake. Till the time you don't have that realization, you will not know that there is something to be fixed. Now that you have that realization, you will be able to implement the right corrective actions, okay? But what does mistake one actually leads to mistake two? They are interrelated. Because you are not focusing on learning the process, you don't spend appropriate time doing the strategic review to figure out to improve your ability. What you end up doing is solving questions after question without actually learning, without actually getting everything, that 200% from each question that you solve. Okay, Gautam, what was he? Sirish, what was he doing? He was doing thorough review. He was learning as much from the review as from attempting that question. That is what you need to start doing in your study process. Okay, and this leads me to the third mistake. And let me just get rid of these scribbles here. This leads to the third mistake, that student believes that solving as many questions as possible is the way to ace the GMAT. Okay. And again, as I said early on, it's not that you guys are not putting in the effort. In fact, my heart aches when I see students solving questions after questions and just, solve, 1,000 SC questions, solve all OG questions, solve this question, that question. But again, you are just wasting your time. You're wasting your precious time because you're not you're not focusing on the right thing. Because you're not focusing on learning the process, you are not questioning the solutions that you are getting. Okay, are you getting the right kind of solutions? Just knowing what the correct answer is doesn't help you. Okay, knowing what is the mistake in the correct answer or what is wrong in the wrong answer doesn't help you. How is it that you should be how is it that you should be approaching those questions? That is what gets you to get to that next level so that you can get to that 90th percentile ability in any subsection. Okay, so again, if you think about it, all these mistakes, mistake one, not focusing on learning the process. Mistake two, not doing proper strategic review. Mistake three, believing that solving as many questions as possible is the way to ace the GMAT. All these mistakes are all interlinked. I want you to take a look at this slide and tell me what it is that you feel today. Absorb the slide. This is the core thing. Only if you agree that these are the mistakes that you are doing today, I can help you not make these mistakes. So tell me. Some introspection is required. Okay. So my question is, do you make these mistakes today? Thank you, Ayam. Really appreciate your feedback, your positive inputs here. Thank you. How do these apply to quant questions? Anirudh, you read my mind. I'm going to be taking up 2 quant questions next. And I'm going to be showing you how these apply to quant questions. But first, let's just agree upon these 3 mistakes. Do you guys say yes if you agree that these are the mistakes that you're making today, or at least one of these mistakes? Because again, if you're making one, you are definitely making another one as well. Okay, you're okay. And again, no one is judging you. Okay, as I said, you guys are working so hard. We just want to make sure that you're working hard in the right direction. You're putting your efforts where it matters, where they matter. Okay, Rahul, I'm definitely plagued with 2 and 3, although with 3, it's less that I'm practicing and more the guilt of not practicing enough is eating me alive. Okay, Rahul, again, yesterday, in fact, I spoke to one of our students who scored a 720. He got a V38, and he told me that he should have practiced more. And when I looked at his scholaranium data, I'm like, why did you feel that you should have practiced more? He solved about 80 questions in SC. In easy questions, his accuracy was about 90%. In medium level questions, his accuracy was about 85%. In hard questions, his accuracy was about 75%. And his SC ability, according to his ESR, was about was actually in the neighborhood of V39, V40. So I'm like, why did you feel that you should have practiced more questions? He said, just because everyone keeps practicing questions. I'm like, no, you don't have to practice questions if you don't need to practice questions. If you've already reached that high ability number that you were targeting, that's it. Why? That's about it. Your goal is to reach that ability number. Okay, so thank you. And now we are going to move on to the quant questions. Raja, you're asking how to do strategic review properly. We will, at the end of this this session, we'll share with you a video in which we talk about how to do strategic review. Okay, so you can take a look at that. That can take another session. In fact, we will be doing one of the sessions, a couple of our sessions in which we'll talk about how to do strategic review. But I can definitely share those instructions with you. All right, so let's move forward. Yeah, so let's talk mistake 3. So Jim, I don't know how many of you have read his success story. It's one of the most popular stories right now, trending on Share My Gmat Experience. Again, when solving questions, quality is always more important than quantity. Okay, quality here, I mean how much time you spend on reviewing each answer choice. Okay, and how can you apply what you learn from solving this one question to other questions in the future? And what you can see is, you can see from Gautam's to Sirish's to James, I mean, these are debriefs, these are students who have embraced the corrective action here. They've made sure that they do proper review so that, you know, they get to their target ability. So now he actually brings up very interesting stuff. Imagine you have the same amount of time. You can either solve one question, and regardless you got it right or wrong, analyze all the answer choices, read the solution, identify all the errors in each wrong answer choice, or solve 5 questions and only look at the choices that you get wrong. Okay, so again, clearly, guess what? The right way to study is always A. Again, what we've been talking about. All right, so again, you can take a look at his debrief as well in this link. Another thing with regards to solving number of questions, these are all successful students here. Okay, I shouldn't be making a downward arrow here. Look at their GMAT scores. Look at their accuracies. As I was talking about the accuracy of this other student whom I interviewed yesterday. Again, similar thing, very high accuracy in easy questions, decently high accuracies in medium level questions. And then again, hard questions are difficult. That's why the accuracy goes down a little bit there. But look at the number of questions that they have solved. This is for SC, okay? 78 questions, 135 questions. Now, this student, definitely, he solved more than 400 questions, but this was across 3 GMAT attempts, okay? Again, 168 questions, this was across 2 GMAT attempts. So again, the key thing over here is, that you don't need to solve multiple questions, thousands and thousands of questions, okay? Okay, all right. Now, again, this is what we talk about in our article, What Causes Success on the GMAT. So definitely read that article. It's going to just, it's going to make sure that I mean, it's a good homework thing for you. After having gone through this session, you go through that article and you see, okay, what do successful students do, okay? All right. Now we're going to solve 2 quant questions. I know we are over our time limit right now, but let's solve 2 quant questions. Can we go 15? We can try to wrap it up in about 15 minutes, okay? But I do want you guys to realize that the same thing applies on a quant as well, okay? So I'm going to give you about, instead of 90 seconds, let's do it 60 seconds. These are easier questions. They are not very difficult questions here. Okay, so here's the question. Go ahead, solve this one. All right, let's get the answers here. Then I'm going to pose the next question. All right, now here comes question number 2. Okay, let's get some more responses here. All right. So for question number 1, there was a split between choices B and C. So let me just write this down. Question 1, A was marked by 5 people and B was marked by 6 people. And the correct answer there is choice B for question number 1. For question number 2, I haven't compiled the stats. Rajat, can you please do that while I go through question number 1? Stats for question number 2, please. Okay, so let's carry forward here. Now, both these questions were relatively easy. They are not very difficult questions. Okay. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you how I would solve this question and how each and every question on the Gmat platform is solved, okay, for quant. So the first thing over here is step 1 is always analyze the question statement, okay? Now, when you analyze, so step 2 is you determine the approach. Before you even start doing things on paper, you actually determine the approach that you would use to solve the question, okay? And then you essentially work it out, and then you select the correct answer, okay? So the first thing is I read the question statement. What is the minimum value of the integer x? So I need to find out minimum value, and I know that x is an integer if I have these two inequalities here, and both these inequalities are in x, okay? So we need to find the minimum value of x. So I note these things down, okay? Now I think about what is the approach. So essentially over here, I have two inequalities, so and one variable. So I'm going to solve each inequality one at a time. And I'll determine the range of x, and based on the range of x, I'm going to find the minimum integer value, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. Now working out, I take up first inequality and I solve it, bring the like terms together. Minus 32x is greater than 64. I get x is less than minus 2. And over here, I had to make sure, because I'm multiplying both sides by a negative number, I had to make sure that I flip the sign of the inequality. I do that, okay? So I did that over here.
take up my second inequality, I get x is greater than or equal to minus 5.5. Again, have to be very careful that I retain the greater than or equal to sign over here. Equal to should not be missed out. And then I do the second thing, which is determine the range of x, and this is the range that I arrive at. And then based on this, the possible values of x, again, x is an integer, I know that, right? So the possible values of x is minus 5, minus 4, minus 3. I needed to find the minimum value of x. Minimum value of x is minus 5. Now, as I said, 6 of you, what did I say earlier? 6 of you selected choice B and 5 of you selected choice A. Okay, easy question. Everyone knows how to solve inequality. Once you know how to solve inequalities, you will be able to solve this question correctly. But you ended up slightly less than half of the class ended up marking choice A as the correct answer, which is wrong. Now, what did you miss? What did you not do in this question? What you did not do was you didn't pay attention to the constraint that was specified to you. Okay. And because of that, you ended up making a mistake. Now, most likely, if you get this question wrong, you will not pay that much attention to it and you will think, oh, that was a silly mistake. I actually forgot to consider that x is an integer. Tell me, how many of you will consider this as a silly mistake and say, it's okay, it's a silly mistake? For those of you who selected choice A. And the entry that you're going to make in the error log is inequalities, but as an error, you're going to say silly mistake. Okay. But as such, the reason why you made the mistake over here, if you selected choice A, and a number of you selected choice A, right? The reason was over here, did not identify and apply the constraint. Okay. So, which has got nothing to do with inequalities. Okay. Constraints exist everywhere. They exist in number properties questions, they exist in word problems questions, they exist in geometry questions, they exist in algebra questions, in advanced topics questions, they exist everywhere. Okay. So when you are not able to identify those constraints, and that's why you end up making a mistake, the worst thing that you can do is classify that mistake as a silly mistake. Okay. Because now you are not learning from the mistakes that you are making. Okay. In fact, and thank you for being so upfront about it. Okay, thank you, Anirudh, Rahul, and Keyur. And again, the key thing over here is, this is, as I said, if you are logging this as an inequality, linear inequality, okay, in a single variable, even if you're logging it as that, you still won't know what corrective actions to apply. Okay, the corrective action to apply will come only if you identify precisely why is it that you got this question wrong. And how will you be able to figure that out? Only if you have detailed solutions that go step by step, from one step to another to the other. In fact, depending upon what your skill level is in inequalities, you may answer this question wrong because you don't know how to solve the inequality. What if you didn't? And again, these are the mistakes that I have already identified. Okay, these are the key steps over here. Now the solution is going to lay out these key steps for you. Okay, so you have to identify why is it that you answered the question wrong, or what step did you falter on. Okay, maybe you weren't able to determine the approach. You saw two inequalities in X. Maybe you just thought that, okay, you have to add the inequalities or whatever. You are not that comfortable, right? So you could have made that mistake, and which means that you have a conceptual issue. Or maybe you didn't flip the sign of the inequality. That is also a conceptual issue. Or you could not visualize the range. How do you combine these two ranges and come up with this? Okay, now in that case, you were not able to visualize the range. That's a process skill of visualization, which is applicable across the board. Okay, or you could not take this possible value of x as minus 5, minus 4, minus 3 and draw the inference that the minimum value of x is minus 5. That's another process skill, drawing inferences, okay, which have got nothing to do with this process skill. Is not specific to inequalities. It is specific, it is actually a global process skill which is applicable across the board. Okay, so again, looking at the solution, the way you can identify which step you faltered on in verbal, the same way you can do that in quant. The key thing is, you have to be cognizant of those process skills. Okay. Secondly, you have to be cognizant, or you have to be aware of the fact that a detailed solution should contain all these aspects over here. Only then can you figure out what is the corrective action to be implemented. Okay. All right. So again, pinpoint the exact reason you got the question wrong. And as I said earlier, conceptual mistakes were these ones. These other ones were actually process mistakes. Okay. Now let's solve the second question. Second question was, if z is an integer, how many values of z square satisfy this inequality? So again, analyze the question statement. Constraint is what? Z is an integer. What it is that I need to find out, what it is that's given to me, that there's one quadratic inequality, one variable, we need to find the number of values of z square. Write down z square explicitly, and I need to find out the number of values of it. Now, what's my approach going to be? I'll solve the inequality, I'm going to apply the constraint and find the answer. Now, when I'm solving the inequality, this is what is given to me. Now, how do I solve this? I interpret, what is this inequality telling me? It's a product of two numbers. It's saying that product of two numbers is less than 0. Now, when is the product of two numbers less than 0? When one term is positive and the other is negative, right? Now, in this case, I basically know that z square plus 4 is always positive. That's my conceptual constraint here, right? That z square plus 4 is always positive. Why? Because z square is always a positive number, right? So, which means that of these two numbers, the number that needs to be less than 0, negative, is z square minus 2, which means that z square is less than 2. So that's one of my range, one of the components of my range. Now I also know I'm considered, so I need to talk about z square, right? I also know that square of a number is non-negative, which means that my overall range is 0 is less than or equal to z square is less than 2. Again, less than equal to is very important. That's my concept over here. Z square is non-negative, right? Which means now, because z is an integer, I bring this constraint over here. Because z is an integer, z square could be 0 or 1. So the answer is 2. Now, let me look at the stats. Choice C was selected by 57% of the class. So good job at that. Choice A, 10.5%. And choice B was actually 21%. So those of you who selected choice B, the mistake that you did was you did not consider z square as non-negative, okay? You did consider that z square is a positive number, but you didn't consider this less than or equal to. You didn't consider the equal to part of the less than or equal to sign here, which is why you thought that the only possible value is 1. So if you think about it, if you were to do error analysis on this question, really speaking, each of these points over here in the solution is actually a process scale related point. Okay, so first one, if you didn't consider that z is an integer, you actually fail to apply the process scale of applying constraints. If you didn't get to this part over here, that means you were not able to draw an inference based on this inequality. Okay, if you didn't do this part here, that z square plus 4 is always positive, you didn't apply a conceptual constraint. Likewise, this part over here as well, you didn't apply conceptual constraint. And then in the end, you could not, if you couldn't get to this part, then you didn't infer information. Now again, most likely, number 4 is the reason why you could not solve the question correctly here. So if you write down quadratic inequalities as the reason in your error log, then you're not going to really take any what corrective action will you take such that you don't make this mistake again? So you need to be very specific about what entries you make in your error log. In this case, you did not apply the conceptual constraint that comes with square of a number. That is, that square of a number is greater than or equal to 0. That is the constraint. So equal to needs to be very, very, needs to be something that you have to make sure you don't repeat that, okay? So again, all failure points in this question were related to process skills. And how do you determine that? You determine that based on, first of all, again, process. Following a step-by-step process is the key here. Step 1, step 2, step 3. You have to do it that way. Secondly, doing detailed strategic review of each question that you solve using detailed solutions which are as detailed as this or even more detailed than this. That is what helps you to take corrective action such that you don't make the same mistakes again. So again, same thing applies to quant. Any thoughts about this right now? What do you think about application of these mistakes on quant questions? Anirudh, we are talking about values of z square. Again, understand what the question statement is. It's asking about possible values of z square, not z. So tell me, what do you think about the application of this on quant questions? You agree with all Ahem? That's good. So guys, what I talked about applies to SC, applies to quant, applies to CR, applies to RC. This is something which are the mistakes that people do while executing any of the subsections. Okay, and the basic principles behind preparing for GMAT are the same across all subsections. Okay, thank you, Kayur, for understanding that, for realizing that. Okay, and again, write to us and and tell us where you need help so that we can help you out with that. Arvind, should we document and note down our identified processes for standard question times? I feel I have processes but never documented them and maintained them. Like, do I do an error log? Should I? Yes, you should do an error log, absolutely. And again, Arvind, if you do the way EGMAT students do, as they are going through the stage 1 of learning the processes and methods, they go through content in a very progressive manner. Okay, so as they are learning stuff, they are interacting with questions that are purpose built for that particular intent, right? They can take notes. They basically do take down notes and they revise as they are moving along. They get the feedback from the system, right? So again, if you are preparing, utilizing a system that has been created with that particular intent in mind, then creating that error log is not really it should not be that laborious task for you, because the onus of your preparation is not completely on your shoulders, because now you have a system that's actually tracking that information. Okay, so that's why it's very important for you to utilize a system that helps you get to that particular point through the path that we are recommending to you. Okay. All right. So, and again, as you go through Scholaranium, definitely things start to you solve questions, you learn from those questions, you take down notes, you then make sure that you're taking feedback from the system and you're applying that feedback appropriately. Okay. Okay, so I think we are 22 minutes above our time thing. Creating Arvind, creating a process document for different question types, I meant, not error log. Now process remains the same for everything. For all SC questions, you're following the same process. It's just that what are those mistakes that you are doing, those process gaps, those are things that you need to be entering in your error log or in your notes. Okay, so again, I'm going to be I will share the strategic review video with you so that you can identify how is it that you should be taking down notes as you are going through stages 1 and stages 2 of prep. Okay, so Yash, you need help in SC. How should you start? Start by writing an email to payal@e-gmat.com and tell us where you are facing problems in, and then where you're facing problems, and we'll be able to help you with it. All right, so I'm going to leave you with these success stories. Definitely take the time to go through the video interviews over here. It's very, interesting to see, very motivating to see how people from a low quant score get to that excellence, right? By, again, making sure that they are not making the mistakes that we have been talking about in this session. Okay, so very, very important. Likewise, Anupriya, she's non-engineer background. Quant was hard for her, but she was able to improve to Q48. In fact, in her interview, she says that if she had a little bit more time, she could have gotten to Q49 as well. Again, methodical approach is what leads to success. Okay, revising mistakes and not repeating the same mistakes. So again, very, very important. So we conduct these free webinars every weekend. So definitely register for the webinar on RC, where I'm going to be talking about what's the right way to approach RC so that you can get to that 90th percentile ability in RC. Okay, so that's next Saturday. So definitely click on this link over here to register for it. And then Quant Workshop, figuring out where you're at in Quant, getting that feedback so that you can take that feedback and then make sure that you create your personalized study plan to implement that feedback. Do that on Sunday. So definitely register for that. So with that, again, I'm going to end with this slide. Do not make these mistakes. Okay, it's my request. Do not make these mistakes. Prepare for GMAT in the right manner so that you can get to your target GMAT score with focused effort, and make it pleasurable. Seriously, preparing for GMAT should not be this hard. Okay, but if you prepare it the right way, it will not be that hard. It's going to require the focus, definitely, but make it a memorable journey. All right, then I'm going to end this session here. As I said, write to us at support@e-gmat.com or send me an email at payal@e-gmat.com and we will get back to you. We are here to help you out. Okay? All right.